Welcome to the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Greene, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change. All right. Well, I am so excited to be sitting down with Christine Varnavas this afternoon. And I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and she's in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And Christine and I go back. And we just made the connection that we were at we both did our first TRE training in 2014 in Madison, Wisconsin. And we remember each other when we were assistants later, but we didn't make the connection that we had done our primary training at the same time, which is kind of funny. But anyway, to introduce Christine a little bit, she is an author, speaker, and educator and wellness coach. She's got deep history with yoga, fitness, and other kinds of education. And she is a TRE provider and trainer. And she is the author of a very awesome and moving and important book, contribution to the TRE literature. I'm going to show it here. I'll put it in the thing later, but it has a great name: Heal Your Shit, Find Your Happy. Straight to the point. I think that kind of matches Christine's personality pretty dang well. She agreed to sit down so we could have a chat about her journey, our shared connection through TRE, and the work that she's doing in the world around healing trauma. So, Christine, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, awesome. Well, normally I start with like backstory, but I kind of want to start with your book story. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can switch to backstory too. But so I'm just going to read for a moment, because I love, even on the back cover, sort of the mission statement or the what's in this book. And it says, "Heal your shit, find your happy," is a call to action for women who manage anxiety, who gracefully or not handle the overwhelm and stress of life, maybe depression, who have felt like they were spinning out of control, who've ever been called too much, or who've often thought, "What is wrong with me?" It's for adult survivors of childhood sexual assault and the people who love them. I'm going to read the next part too. The author Christine Varnavas educates the reader on how stress and trauma work and how it affects those around us if not released. She also shares parts of her story, some not so fun things, and the amazing somatic body-based tools that showed up in her life to help her feel and heal just when she needed them. The invitation is to do the work in your body in this lifetime, on this planet, right now, to heal and break the chain of generational trauma using the wicked wisdom of our bodies, and maybe even have some fun while doing it. So anyway, that's the nutshell version of what's captured here. So Christine, my first question on the book is, what led up to you? When did you write it? Like in the last year or two? How did you decide it was time to put these pieces together? If this is your first book, how did that come together? Yeah.
Yes, it is my first book. It took about 14 months to write, which I guess is the average compared to from when I'm talking to other authors.
Sure.
Not everyone, obviously. The idea to write a book was planted, and I actually talk about this in the book, that the idea to write a book was planted for me by one of my teachers about 3 or 4 years ago. Someone who I go to, and I don't spiritual coach, teacher, that kind of thing. And I've got a few of those in my life that when things happen and I'm trying to, what is going on? This doesn't make sense. I need something, to wrap my head around this. I'll go to these few women. Yep. And so I asked this woman, I said, what's coming up for me career-wise? I was in a good place, but I was like, what's coming up for me career-wise? And she said, well, you're going to write a book. And I went, oh. And I said, and what is the book about? And she said, it's about your life. And I, in me fashion, made a really funny face and said out loud with love and snark, as I do everything, who the wants to read a story about my life?
Okay. Yep.
Well, she and one of my best friends were there, and they both went, uh-huh, okay. And I went, okay, noted, point taken.
Yep.
And so I said, okay, give me a little more detail. And she said, well, it's a look back. It's a memoir about your life.
Yep.
Looking back over some of the, things that have gone on in your life, the tools that you use to overcome, right, for lack of a better term. And then it culminates with TRE. And I went, cool.
Yeah. You liked it.
Yeah. That made sense to me, once I got out of my own way and went, oh, okay. Yeah. And it's that classic, if one person reads it and it helps them, giddy up. That's the magic right there. So, I kind of took that to heart and went, oh, that's real. I would love for that to happen, to, help people feel better in their skin, help all the things. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward about a year. Well, it was published in May, 2 months ago. And fast forward to about a year and a half ago, a woman who I had known years ago, had not seen for a long time. Her, I'm going to bookend or frame this with, this is one of those universal interventions that happens to me a lot.
Yeah.
Her name and her business kept coming across my feed, whether that was social or, her name would pop up somewhere. And it happened like maybe a half a dozen times. And finally I saw the name of her business. It's a publishing business.
Yeah.
And it was called Inner Peace Press. And I went, ding, ding, ding.
Yep.
So, and we have a Greek connection. So I reached out to her and I said, hey. She went, oh, yes.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
What was with the writing process? Was it in waves? Was it steady? Was it easy? Was it tortuous? How did the flow go for you?
Yes to all. Yes to all. Okay. I wouldn't say torturous, but it was interesting because writing the stories actually was the easy part, with the exception of I'd write a story, we outlined it. And then we, this story we're going to use, and this is the tool that showed up, and and then we needed a call to action, and an invitation to the reader. But as I would write a story, another story would pop up, which is very interesting. And so I'm like, oh, should I write about that? And so it was. The hard part about writing was that there was still some unprocessed stuff that I didn't know was still hanging out in here. And I would be writing and I would tears and I'm like, oh, that's still here. Okay. So it wasn't hard, like, I didn't want to do this. I can't do this. It was hard, like, wow, okay, I need to pause and let this come out.
Yeah.
And sit and deal with that for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I liked, there was one section, one of those stories near the end. And I appreciate, and one thing I'm appreciating in your writing style is like, sort of as you're writing, kind of letting in behind the scenes. And then I think there was a parenthetical comment. It was like, you may be wondering, is this hard to write about? And yes, it is. I'm crying tears right now, but healing tears. And I really liked that. I appreciated that sort of style. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To that note, really quick, because a lot of people have asked me about this.
Yeah.
The writing style is meant to be, it's very informal and it's very conversational. Like I'm speaking to you right now, like I'll pause, and I'll put ellipses in, and it's intended that way for two reasons. One, there's a favorite author of mine who wrote the book, You Are Badass. And I read that a couple of years ago and I love the way she wrote because it is very casual, very easy, like having a conversation, right? It's not theoretical, blah, whatever. So I really enjoyed that. And I thought if I ever wrote a book, I would like to write it that way because that speaks to me and that's who I am. Right. And then talking about trauma and stress and sexual assault and all the things is not always a pretty, topic. And So to put, to kind of wrap it in a little bit of, hey,
yeah, there can be lightness, there can be informality. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not all gloom and doom. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I'm curious about the title, Heal Your Shit, Find Your Happy, because so I want to know, like, if it popped into your brain or if somebody suggested, or maybe you're not at liberty to share. I'm not sure. But I wanted to say that if somebody told me that there was a new book called Heal Your Shit, Find Your Happy, and that I knew who wrote it, then I would, and if I had to guess who it was, I would have guessed you.
Oh, really?
Like that. Yes. That's how specific I feel like. That's how like perfectly it matches my experience of you. It's like, I think I would know if I had to guess that Christine wrote that book. So anyway, I think it's very appropriate.
Thank you. That is a huge compliment. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there a story, or how did you?
That was probably the hardest thing out of the whole book writing process, other than going back and editing and figuring out what was going to go where, because it does jump around. It's like,
right.
I knew it had to be about healing. I knew it had to be about women. I do work with global population, but my primary audience that I work with is women.
Yeah.
And anyway, yeah. So I knew it had to be about healing. I knew I didn't want it to be all
right,
because that can be heavy. And how do I present this in a way that's informational, engaging, thought-provoking, educational, and kind of lighthearted at the same time? So I knew I had about 3 or 4 different titles, and we finally landed on this one. And I think it was one of those universal intervention things. I was driving down the street one day and I remember I was like, okay, what is the name of this damn book? I'm like, somebody, what is the name of the damn book? I'm alone in my car. I'm talking to the universe. I'm like, give me something here. Yep. And literally just went, and I went, thank you. Yes.
Nice.
And then it was the subtitle, I played around with that a little bit more. The generational trauma, the placement of the words and that kind of stuff. But in the end, I am so happy with it. It says exactly what I wanted it to say.
Cool. Very cool. Well, could you think we could walk through some of the, first of all, people can just read your book, so we don't need to like do everything that's there. But I wonder, like, maybe you could talk a little bit about just kind of the structure, because you're right. Some of it is personal story. Some of it's, personal story in the, historic, childhood, right? Trauma. Some of it's personal story, like, your adult years and some of your healing journey, which is really great. Some of it's educational, around, trauma education and concepts around healing and things that survivors, things that you wish you had known earlier, things like that. So I wonder if we could just sort of speak to some of the different, kind of things that get touched on in your book.
Sure. The tools, maybe? Or
a good starting point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, what would be the best starting point?
Well, how about this? To me, the biggest starting point, I think, now that I reflect on that, is the introduction to movement for me.
Yeah, can you share? Tell us about that.
So, as a child and a young adult, probably all the way up until I was 18, maybe 19, I'm not sure when that happened, for most of my life, I felt uncomfortable in my skin. It doesn't mean that 99% of the time it was always yuck, but there were times more often than not that I was just like, and I read about that. It's like, I always felt better when I was with my friends, but I just felt bad in my skin. Looking back, it probably was depression or some flavor of depression and hormones and, whatever.
Right.
But that the moment that I saw, when this is 1985, saw these women out my window. I was going to school in Madison and I was living off the Capitol, and I looked out my window and I saw in the basement window, all of these women doing aerobics, and they were moving back and forth, and you could hear the bass on the, and they were smiling and laughing. And I remember just being transfixed, like someone, glued me. Talk about a freeze. I mean, I just went boom. And I was like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I need that. I don't know what that is, but I need
yep.
it, because they were smiling and laughing, and you could hear the music, and I was just like, game changer. So
Right.
I don't even know if it was the next day or how I got into it, but I remember very shortly after that, I was in that basement across the street, moving and sweating to music and laughing and having a good time.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember that was one of the first things I think that brought me out of that high functioning or not freeze
and discomfort in your body. Yep.
It was magic. I mean, I use the word movement as medicine a lot. It was magic. It was absolutely magic. And then I became addicted to it. I loved it. I craved it. I was happy. It was wonderful. And then ultimately I started teaching. So
got it.
Yeah.
And so that was in college years. Is that what you're saying? You were at Madison? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I guess backing up for a moment, if you're okay, part of the story, one of the pieces that I appreciated from sort of terms of setting the scene was you sort of described that when your trauma story came out into the world, moment, which was, backstory, some sexual abuse by your adoptive father, but that was kind of all on the inside until in a moment of kind of sort of a rage or something with your mom, it kind of all came out in a dramatic way. And then that and your mom sort of sprung into action and catalyzed what ended up becoming a successful case against your abuser. And what I was struck by was just sort of the speed that all of that unfolded at a young age. I mean, I think you were 16 or in high school when the story came out and the legal process happened. My reading of your story was that, of course, that was challenging, difficult, traumatic. My reading of the story was that there were some good things, obviously, about getting justice and whatnot. Can you share just a little bit about that kind of that
how it came out and the so I was 16, as you said. I was dating, although I wouldn't really call it dating. I was involved with, very briefly, this guy, and I had broken the household rule, and I had stayed out all night instead of coming home when I was supposed to, and sitting in the car with this boy in the front of my house. My mom walked out, and it was just chaos ensued. And of course, I was grounded, and this boy was home from the Marines, and so that meant I'm on leave for about this much time, and so that time then was taken away from me
by being grounded.
Being grounded. And I don't know if it was the next day or later that afternoon. I don't know, but I remember just fuming. I was so livid with my mother. And I walked in and I just spewed. It was literally, you hear about people like going postal or just erupting, like, and it literally felt like that, like this volcano I didn't plan it. I didn't think about it. It just erupted out of, it just happened. I spewed. I was sitting outside. I remember I walked in the house and my mom was vacuuming and I just yelled at the top of my lungs to her. I said, I would rather live with Rick. Was his name. I would rather live with Rick and put up with his sexual assault than live here with you right now, knowing I can't see insert name.
So-and-so. Yeah.
And she went, what? What?
Right.
It's like the world stopped. I mean, you hear about those, like the world stops and goes in slow motion. That's exactly what happened.
One of those moments. Yep.
Yeah. The world just stopped and everything it was kind of wah, 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 one of those. And the first thing she said to me, I don't think I have this in the book, maybe I do, was, have you ever told me this before? And the reason I said no. And the reason she asked me that is because she had just taken, she's an educator as well. And she had just taken a child abuse class. And what they had covered was why people don't disclose. And so, and she's brilliant. And she immediately, after I think I must have reiterated the story to her.
Right.
She went into problem solving mode, just boom, 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 boom. And and then I remember, then it was very fuzzy. Like I said, it was like in slow motion. We ended up in my bedroom in the house. I remember we were sitting on the floor and she called him. It was her ex-husband. And she said something to the effect of, Christy just told me this, and whatever else she said. And his words to her literally were, Carolyn, my mother's name, Carolyn, I'm going out of town right now. I'll call you when I get back. And I saw her do with kind of one of the, those, like, excuse me?
Right.
And he repeated it and then hung up, and that was it. And she had this dumbfounded look on her face, like,
right. He didn't deny it. Yeah.
That's the key right there, is he didn't deny it.
Yep.
And so that just started, then she called her attorney in Tennessee. We were in Wisconsin, and it went on and on and on. And there's a whole big thing about the court case. I do want to say something really quick about that. So it did go to court. It was appealed because he was a politician and a Fulbright professor. And so he had friends.
Connections. Yeah.
Yep. And the judge initially threw it out. It went to Cincinnati. It was overturned, and then it went back to that same court. But ultimately, we ended up dropping the case. So nothing actually really came of it. We had that big win in Cincinnati that a minor could sue their parent under these circumstances. So that is the win. That is a huge win.
I see. Okay. I see.
But ultimately, the end of it was we dropped it.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you look back, I guess when you look back, was it a good thing? I mean, that it came out that way and that it mobilized, like when you think about the court case and there was one win, but there was also kind of a loss. It's like, when you think about your own recovery, was that helpful and useful for you in some way, or was it not good?
Coming out of the story?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I think that was the right time for it to come out. I mean, like I said, it wasn't planned, and very few select people in my world had ever heard the story. Yeah. And as I write about in the book, based on who I told, who was going to believe me? He was a big politician. He was
powerful guy.
Yeah, at the university level. So
yeah, I
think. Well, the big thing with the story is that it then muddied the family. It really divided the family, meaning like his family, he was not my biological father, but his family, cut me off and
right. You became,
it was
pushed out. Yep.
Yeah. It was not good. And then he decided to try to turn my brother, his son, his biological son, my brother. We didn't turn him against me, but he involved him. And that was the hardest part, I think, because he was a little boy and he would tell him, I would never do that to her. Go talk to her. And I was like,
yeah. Gaslighting 101. Yeah. Yes. Great. Yeah. Nice.
Yep. Which ultimately he continued until his deathbed 2 years ago. Yeah. The shame. I can't even.
The power of denial. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's really it. I mean, I think that saying about, you can change your mind, or, we talk about neuroplasticity and TRE, and, it's that if you tell yourself something enough, you're going to believe it.
Yeah.
And in this case.
Yeah. Powerful defense mechanism. I never did that. I would never do that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that much. I know that's a challenging piece. I mean, I guess, so talk a little bit more about the spirit of the book. I mean, so one of your first big learnings was around movement and fitness. And how did things develop from there in terms of basically tools and perspectives you've gathered along the way?
Well, I knew exercise was magic for me. I
Mm.
needed to move. That's how I felt good in my body. I love teaching. And it was just a really natural fit for me in not only the traditional classroom, but in the fitness classroom. Um, but I was doing only exercise, and over time, my body got really cranky because as magic as exercise is,
Yeah.
it stresses the body, right? It
Okay.
really stresses the body,
Yeah.
and the effects weren't long lasting. The feel good didn't
Yeah.
last.
The stress reduction, the anxiety relief,
Yes,
the mood boost was short lived.
it was
Okay.
absolutely was. Yep, absolutely. Well said.
Okay.
Uh, I then got into yoga because a friend I taught at a gym, a local gym, and we were introducing yoga at that time. And friends, I would take their class, and I was laughed at how inflexible I was from all the exercise from all the years.
Mm.
And one of my friends who taught yoga kept saying, "You need to teach, you need to teach, you need to teach because you get the mind body connection."
Mm.
Okay,
Mm. Mm.
interesting.
Mm.
So I continued to take classes, and then, without going into all the details, I just ended up taking a yoga teacher training class, and it was that at that point in my life, that was the missing piece. That was kind of the yin and the yang because it made me sit still with myself, and
Mm.
I had never done that. I was always in constant motion,
Mm.
um, and that
Yeah.
was pretty powerful. And then, sitting still and listening.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Who? What?
Mm. Mm.
Why would one sit still?
Bad idea. Keep moving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then between that and then the power of laughter. Laughter is such a huge. I love laughing. It feels good.
Well,
It's
I think most pictures I see of you look something along these lines. So yeah.
yeah. I love it. It feels good, and we smile, and that whole social engagement, right? The piece is
Absolutely.
so amazing.
Yeah.
And then ultimately I was introduced to TRE, which was
Yeah.
game changer, absolute game changer for me. I
Right.
could
Yeah.
talk about it all day. Could
Totally.
talk.
So let's go into that one. Just in case anybody listening does, if you don't know what TRE is yet, then this must be the first podcast of mine that you've listened to because it comes up frequently. But tension and trauma releasing exercises, just to be complete with the name. And it's this method that invokes this neurogenic tremor or this trembling process in the body that has a significant effect on the nervous system and the body as a whole. So, yeah, I mean, it was a big explosion for me too, but I want to hear your version. I want to hear what was it like? What was the big impact for you?
It. Oh wow! How do I narrow this down? Let's see. Oh, I did in the book. It's that thing, that tool, that little magic thing that got to that proverbial itch that I could not scratch. Right?
Ah, okay. Yeah.
It got to the core of my stuff. And so I guess I'll use one of my training slides as a to paint a picture. So
Sure.
this slide that I use the iceberg theory as an analogy,
Mm-hmm.
and the top of the iceberg is exercise, and for me that was like spinning and aerobics and all those things, and then yoga
Mm.
and laughter
Mm.
and probably some food as medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But those were
Mm-hmm.
the things that I thought those were my tools. Those were my tools. That was my feel good. That was my happy.
Okay.
But it didn't keep me regulated. It didn't keep life from happening and me from getting laid out. It didn't keep me from the overwhelm. It didn't keep me from what as I lovingly say, Medusa mommy moments
Mm. Yep. Yep.
when I
Yep.
would just, spew at my children and then be like, what was that? Oh my
Right.
God. Beat
Yeah.
myself up, shame and blame because I didn't understand why it was happening.
Right. Right.
And then so under that iceberg is the TRE is what helped me kind of go, oh. So it was not only the body-based, the release, the get to the core, to get it out, to all the things. It was the awareness of how things actually work that we learn in TRE.
Right. So the learning, so the method plus the context, the learning, the understanding the autonomic nervous system, the understanding when we go into stress physiology, that was a really big deal for you, understanding yourself.
That was huge. My background is in hospitality and education and training and development. And so that's not, and I address that in the book, because most of us mere mortals, unless we're a mental health professional or a neurologist or neuro anything or psych, we don't understand how these things work, because why would we, right? Unless you have a diagnosis.
Right.
But we don't know these things. And so because we don't understand these things, there's always what's wrong with me? Why do I behave like that? And then shaming, whether we do it to ourselves or other people do it to us.
Right.
So I think that's that educational awareness, that foundation is huge, is absolutely huge. And then the physical release, that is just I read about it in the book. The first time I realized that how huge TRE had impacted me was one of my triggers from childhood always had been time. I had to be on time, because the stepfather was really late for everything. And so I associated being on time and being late with him. So I always had to be on time.
Yep.
And I was presenting at a conference, and I felt like I was late based on my time. Not that I was going to miss my slot, but I felt I was late, and I couldn't find a parking spot.
Yep.
And normally I call in the book, I call it that inner rev, that anxiety would start to build, and I would get anxious and, oh shit, but that wasn't happening. And I remember like stopping in the parking lot as I'm looking around going, is anybody seeing this? This is
hey, right. I'm not totally freaking out that I'm late to something. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I'm like, what has changed? What has changed? What's new? The only thing that was new was Terry.
Yeah.
So I was
super cool. So in those first, to me, it's always interesting to hear about, like when TRE is kind of new. I mean, sometimes the first experience is pretty dramatic, but it's almost like those first few months, oftentimes, where you're sort of tracking some changes, and that example you gave right there is where your baseline level of freak out at something had shifted. That's like your set point had shifted. In my view is we all have sort of a different stress signature, like some of us. And so some of us are working through excessive sympathetic arousal, that inner rev is always there. Some of us are working through, shutdown and freeze physiology. Sometimes we're working through both of them. So so when I think about the path to a more well-regulated, beautiful, juicy nervous system that we all are striving for in TRE and other somatic practices, it's kind of like the road to get there is a little bit different for everybody. What was your version? So I'm hearing the rev side. You nodded when I said freeze. What were some of your own nervous system healing that you needed to do to get more into that, safe, well-regulated ventral vagal system?
I just had to keep practicing TRE and taking time with myself. And this is huge for women, letting the tears come. Let the tears come, because that crying is such a healing thing. It is such a release.
Yeah.
And at least in my world, I don't know about yours, Alex, but in my world, and I say that gender, different professional background, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
In my world, most women I work with, and this includes me, is we're not taught really true, deep self-care. And I'm not talking about washing your hair and, taking a shower, that kind of stuff, like self-care. What's going on? Check in with yourself. What is, how are you feeling? Are you, and much deeper than that.
Right.
I think I'm getting derailed. I don't know where I was going with that, but we're not taught that. And so being able to allow that crying to happen, to just sit with yourself.
Right.
And listen to, things that maybe download, or whether it's, the universe talking, or you share with a friend, or you allow yourself to be vulnerable, because when you're in a freeze, right, we're armored up. We're
defensive mode. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's so subconscious.
Yeah.
It is so subconscious. So looking back at, times in my life where I think those are the mile markers, is looking back on those times in my life where I behaved in ways that just made me go, what was that? Why
what was going on there?
Exactly. And then being able to go back and look at that. So it's being in the present, it's being in the moment, it's allowing the emotions to come. It's that proverbial, you have to feel to heal.
Feel it to heal it. Yep.
That's exactly it. And a lot of us, especially if we're in a freeze, we may not be able to feel it, but we don't necessarily want to, because emotions are uncomfortable. They make us uncomfortable. And I really believe, and I use this as an analogy with my friends all the time, I said, think about your grandparents. And this is tongue in cheek, but think about grandparents in those old tin type photos, right? Is anybody smiling?
Right.
No. How are you? Fine.
Right.
How are you really? Well, you don't want to know, because we're not taught to really embody and know who we are and why we are the way we are. And then look at that. It's I think we have to shift that paradigm of knowing who we are. Really learning who we are, why we are the way we are, and loving and accepting that. Yep. And then TRE kind of opened that gateway for that, which is very cool.
So in your healing of your shit, there was a lot of feeling of the feelings, crying of the feelings, and there's no going back. You needed that for your own. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember crying one time years and years and years after my grandmother had died, my mom's mom, and my mom was like, "Why, honey? Why are you?" And I told her, and she's like, "That was so long ago." And I went, "Yeah, yes, but my generation can do better."
Right.
Right.
Well, so I love, so let's touch on that theme of your book, because, the subtitle is "Get into Your Body, Break the Cycle of Generational Trauma." And that comes in really clearly through this book, this call to action, this invitation of, do it for yourself, but also, do it for yourself first, but also do it, this concept of breaking the cycle. Could you just share a little bit your thoughts around this generational component?
Yeah, absolutely. There's many tendrils around that, but I think that the first one that comes to mind is, and when I do book readings, I speak to this about women and stress. And one, to loop back to what I said before, we really don't know how this works. And so having an awareness is important, but because that can give us grace with ourselves and others.
Yeah.
But as far as being a parent or a mother, and not wanting my children to suffer or feel bad, as much in their life as I did. I'm clearly not going to, nor did I ever sexually assault my child. But because that was part of my story, among other things, right? Just stress in general and the hijacked nervous system from when I was a kid, if you refer to the ACEs study, all that stuff.
Yeah.
They're picking up on my anxiety.
Right.
They are through, it's not like I walk in the room and go, hey, and then here's some anxiety, blah, 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 blah. So,
Right.
but they're
Right.
picking up on that.
Right.
They are experiencing my emotions, my overwhelm, my reactivity. They're the brunt of that, unfortunately, right? They're in that field. They're in that field.
Right. Right.
And yeah. And then, how my mom's stress system was altered. We now know through research, the stress systems are altered through genetically through women. And, my grandma's was altered, and she probably didn't process her stuff in the 1900s, what women did. We didn't even, and then she passed that on to my mom, and my mom had her altered stress response and her stuff. And then she passed it on to me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's important, because what we know now about this is that it's affected by two things. It's genetics, it's epigenetics, but it's also environmental.
Right.
And we can't necessarily, depending on who you're talking to, of course, we can't go back and change the past, again, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
But if we do the work in this body, in this lifetime right now, to up our game, to raise our resilience, to process some of that shit out of our system that we're carrying. And by that, I mean, like in the bones, if we process it out, then we're not going to subconsciously share it with our kids and those people around us. It's that whole neuroception thing. We're not going to, or we can decrease the negative impact that it has. Right.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's the thing. And then if we can do that, that is a win. Holy Hannah, that's a win.
Yeah. No, I resonates fully. Well, as a new father, I have a 14-month-old, and I think about, what you commented earlier, this idea that, most of us, we don't, unless we develop some specialization, we become a neurophysiologist or a trauma, nobody is getting taught about their autonomic nervous system and stress physiology and limbic hijacking. And, these are not things that we were sort of taught. And I sometimes say it's like we're a complicated microwave, and then we never got any instructions. We just sort of are making the best of things. And so my daughter's only 14. I can't explicitly teach her about the polyvagal theory quite yet, but I do think about, like, okay, well, all right. But, my wife and I, we talk about how we're going to educate about emotions and the nervous system and whatnot, because it seems so important. What has it been like for you to share with your daughters what you have learned? Have they been interested? Have they been receptive? Like, what have you been able to pass on to them in terms of your own learning in this field?
Well, to a degree, and, the healing is still taking place. It doesn't, we have this, I don't know if you were in that line of people that, I don't remember, it was one of the trainings that we were all in, whether it was Madison or Arizona or something. And all I remember is laying down on the floor, we tremored. And then whoever I was next to, we looked at each other and went, you healed yet? after one, 30-minute session or something. Yep. All gone.
All done. Yep.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And nor do we want it to work that way, right? When you're doing this kind of work, we want to dip our toe in and then step back and
integrate. Yep.
My oldest probably got the brunt of my stuff because I didn't know. I didn't know that I had this overloaded system. I just knew that a lot of the time when she was really little, it was too much for me. It was just too much for me, and I didn't know how to handle it. And so I reacted more than, is ideal.
Yeah.
Which could have very easily triggered her anxiety. She's got some really severe anxiety and depression. And let me back up. There's one other thing. This is huge. Another benefit of doing the work in this body right now on this planet to stop that, to break that cycle is I have an autoimmune disease and so do both of my girls.
Okay.
And I know no one has ever said this because because, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I know in my heart of hearts, the moment I started learning about all of this, that is the exact reason I was developed, or I was diagnosed with thyroid disease, because
Mm-hmm.
it was triggered by the birth of my first daughter, because my body went, oh, I'm out. This is too much for me.
Uh,
It was the surgery. It was the
yep.
stressful pregnancy. I was working full time. I was finishing grad school, and
Yep.
then it was just too much. And so my
Yep.
body said, I'm done.
Yep.
So being able to nurture our nervous system at a young age,
Mm.
can help. That's the
Yep.
theory, mitigate it. And if we can teach parents to love on our nervous system,
Yep.
hopefully we can decrease the rise or the increase,
Yep.
yeah, of, you know, um, autoimmune diseases.
Yeah. 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 Well, so who are you working with these days? I know, you said you work with everybody, but you have a bit of a focus and specialization with women. I know you're doing in-person work, your one-on-one work too. What's your sort of, beyond your own healing, how are you serving your audiences these days?
I'm doing a lot of things right now. I do one-on-ones.
Yep.
I am doing some women's retreats, very small, intimate women's retreats called Wicked Wisdom, which I kind of refer to the book. It's a nod to the wicked wisdom of the body. And
I like it. Yeah.
our body is
Nice.
so intelligent. We just have to take a beat and learn just enough to go, oh, I want to try that. And then you do the practice TRE, which is what we do, some other
Hmm.
nervous system regulation shift things.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's you get that feel good, and then you understand what the short and long term benefits are
I
of
see.
that. So I do that. I'm doing some TRE trainings. I have a cohort going right now. I have a new cohort starting in October of this year. Um, I am launching a women's um, program called Wicked Wisdom. The program, so it's a much longer program.
Like a
And it's
a course or something, or a community going through. Oh, great.
exactly, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And TRE,
Available online, the Wicked Wisdom program. Yeah.
it will be. It's coming soon. I haven't put it. It's mentioned on my website.
Hmm.
It's not out there yet. So yeah, lots of things, and doing lots of speaking, promoting the book, and then we'll do a TED talk at some point.
All right. Ooh, ooh. Yeah. Let me know when, and I'll
Yeah.
I want to come be in the audience. Um, Very cool. Well, we'll put all your links and everything in the show notes as we always do. Your website, all of the so we can folks can plug in and see what you're up to. Anything else you want to just mention about any other activities or closing thoughts or pearls of wisdom or
I the one thing I will say, and I think this is how I end the book,
hmm.
uh, which apparently there are more books coming. I'm being told. I'm like, just
Aha,
let me get this
aha,
first.
aha.
Um, is the outcome, the zooming out, if you will, the
Hmm.
outcome of doing the work in this body on this planet right now, is that doing the work, in doing the work, you can learn to
Hmm.
love yourself.
Hmm.
And that, in essence, leaves a legacy of love instead of fear.
Hmm.
Because when I teach my students, we do that, and I'm not going to go into um, the dorsal vagal, but um, just to simplify old school, fight or flight,
Hmm.
rest and digest, right?
Right.
It's fight or flight, rest and digest, protect, connect, fear,
Yeah.
love,
Love. Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
And I know this body lived in fear for so many years, and I wasn't even aware of it. And so it's that learning to be in love,
Hmm.
not only with yourself,
Right.
But then when you can love yourself, it is so much easier to love everyone else around you.
Right.
And
And
a legacy of love and not fear.
absolutely. And that shift is it's not a mental shift. It's not a positive thinking. It's your nervous system. It's this changing of the state of your nervous system. It's a whole body kind of a shift in experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I'm so glad that you did write your book, that those friends or colleagues or mentors nudged you in that direction. And really fun just to hear about kind of where you're at with all of this right now. So I really appreciate this time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.